All right, thanks, Jen, and thanks to everybody for joining our Coffee Talk session today. By way of introduction, I'm John Paquette. I'm the head of customer success for TIS's U.S. market, as well as the host of our Coffee Talk series. So I hope everyone is doing well. Just to introduce today's session here a bit, we're going to hit on a lot of topics that I know the community is really interested in because I get a lot of questions on these all the time. First and foremost, the main topic of our chat today, and it'll be a theme throughout our conversation, the digital treasury ecosystem. Here we're talking about global treasury technology rollouts that have many systems involved, ERPs, TMSs, specialized applications, and really strategies for putting these in place in a way that they become really networked and optimized in a way that drives value for your organization. But we're also going to touch upon a couple of other interesting topics as well. First, strategies for companies with decentralized organization structures. So we're going to talk through some of the topics around how you can strike that balance between controls and standardizations, but not really hinder that regional autonomy most organizations are looking to hold on to. And then lastly, really strategies around using multiple technology solutions to achieve finance and treasury technology objectives. This is the so-called best of breed topic that we're going to bring into this conversation as well. So should be an interesting conversation. Before we jump into it, I do want to welcome our guest for this session, Bobby Fitzgerald from Bowler Company, and give him an opportunity here to introduce himself as well.
Hi, John. Thank you for that great introduction. My name is Bobby Fitzgerald. I'm the Treasury Manager for the Bowler Company out of Schaumburg, Illinois, and I'm happy to be here today.
All right. Thanks a lot, Bobby. So maybe just to frame our conversation here a bit, we could talk a little bit about Bowler's organizational structure, and just to give some context to look into what you guys were looking to achieve and what kind of challenges came with that. So first and foremost, I know Bowler is a parent company. You have many different local subsidiaries, probably the largest one of those being Hendrickson. But maybe you could talk us through some of the organizational structure variables that you guys deal with.
Sure. So we're pretty unique in that we're a holding company, but then we're also a family office in a way. We manage both the subsidiaries, the operating companies that the family owns, as well as their portfolio of investments and assets that they own personally. So it was a bit of an interesting mix when we tried to determine what the best technology was to achieve our goals of connecting our different accounting systems with all of our various banking groups in an automated way, and one that approached both the operational aspects of our subsidiaries as well as the holdings of the family themselves. So you have this global organization that really is worldwide, very, very broad in scope. And then you also have, a unique mix of local banks and groups, as well as investment groups that roll into it as well.
Yeah, and I bring it up because I alluded to this a little bit in the introduction here, but we talk to a lot of organizations who have similar decentralized structures, and they're looking to kind of find that balance. They want to put in place some degree of standardization, some degree of financial controls, globally across all their organizations, but they don't want to necessarily insert themselves so much into the weeds of every single little regional process. Some of these are working really well, for the regions, and they don't want to necessarily interject themselves, but from just a controls and more of a networking of information perspective, they do want to find a way to kind of tie all that in together. So I guess, was Bowler trying to achieve something similar? Maybe what were the considerations, and what really shaped the assessment process?
Sure. So like you said, we're very decentralized in nature with each of the subsidiaries that the family owns. They operate independently, and we want to give each of those subsidiaries their own autonomy as far as how they function. We wanted them to maintain all of the relationships that they have in place with their customers and with their vendors, and not necessarily have to worry about the management of cash and whatnot. So, but we wanted to give them some visibility as to where their cash was, what their transactional activity looked like, to be able to give them some tools that would help with the analysis of that data, while still maintaining control up here at the the head office.
Yeah, so it sounds like it was twofold. It was, or I guess threefold. It was operational efficiencies, data, giving everybody visibility into their data, and then putting in place some sort of kind of standardization of processes from a control standpoint. Just kind of curious, how did you guys decide what this should all look like? What was the best practice solution?
Sure. So there was a little bit of research done internally. We handed out surveys to our various subsidiaries and divisions and groups to gain a better understanding of how they were going about their day-to-day operations. We also consulted with external auditors, with our internal audit groups, and had some candid conversations with our division heads and heads of the various subsidiaries to just really gain some insight as to how things were going to work, and what the best way was to function as far as implementation of this centralized communications network that we were looking to establish globally. The biggest goal really was to help prevent potential fraud throughout the organization. As a decentralized organization, there you don't have as much control over everything, and so you want to make sure that the control that you are handing out to the subsidiaries and divisions that are working underneath the head office still have some controls in place, and that those controls are being followed in order to prevent potential fraud, and also to help with things like manual entry error and some other issues that might occur as a result of individuals working on payments and reporting, adding those items to their accounting systems and whatnot. We felt that the automated nature of the system might help with that as well. So.
Yeah, so it sounds like a lot went into the assessment process. I know one advantage that you guys had was this was not your first technology project, right? So you already had a TMS in place for foundational kind of cash management, cash visibility type processes. You had that project already under your belt. That project was obviously managed by the Treasury team. This project as well, the global bank connectivity and payments rollout, right, for all these regional subsidiaries, another project that really the Treasury team mostly took on from a project management standpoint. But now you're working with many different local teams, right? Different regional processing centers, finance teams, IT teams. There's a lot of people involved in obviously orchestrating something this global in nature. So I guess, what was that process like? I guess, was it a difficult thing to fall into, kind of managing things at that level versus, a traditional Treasury project?
So it definitely was a little more challenging, especially with the global aspect of the project. The teams that maybe you've talked with every now and then, as you follow up with your teams in Asia or Europe, largely because of the time difference. Now you're working with them, on a daily basis or a weekly basis on things. So it definitely, I think, improved our understanding of how the organization works and helped us get into the nitty-gritty of the operational aspects of the organization to better understand them and figure out how we're going to put things in place to improve those operations.
Yep. Anything interesting come out of that process? Like, did you guys discover a bunch of, something going on that you didn't know what was going on, or a bunch of unknown bank accounts or something, or some really good process that one of the regional centers had in place that you could kind of replicate globally, and leverage that? Just kind of curious about that too.
Yeah, so there was a lot of things that we uncovered. Like I said, we learned a lot about the way that the various teams functioned, and part of that was learning about some new bank accounts that were open, not necessarily in a bad way, but just things that were open for their operational efficiencies to make things a little bit easier on their end, and so we learned about those. We learned about some of the processes that we thought were fully automated were maybe not quite as automated, or still had some manual processes that were associated with them. And then we were able to gain a little bit better understanding as to maybe where some of the weak points were as far as fraud mitigation and again, improving that manual entry error
That sounds like the typical thing most of our customers do see too. Well, it sounds like you guys had some good, operational guidance that came out of that assessment process, but it also seems like these projects are typically good opportunities for cleanup as well. Most all organizations find accounts they don't know exist and things like that. They can get more efficient about their account structure and things. So
Yeah,
yeah.
if I could, say, going through that whole process and learning about how our various divisions had worked allowed us to close out a significant number of bank accounts. Just having those candid conversations with the division heads and heads of the various legal entities that are subsidiaries of ours, allowed us to close out probably maybe a quarter of our bank accounts and helped us save maybe about 20% on our bank fees. So, it was a huge win for us from that aspect, and we're still, not done with our implementation at this point. So,
Yeah, that's huge. That's a big save. So, and we alluded to the fact that you guys already had a TMS in place, so a decent handle on cash visibility for the most part into your main accounts and things like that. But this project more addressed, I guess, maybe a missing link between what was happening at the subsidiaries and their systems themselves, right? The e-batches, the payments that were being done on a day-to-day basis. I guess, did you guys get a lot better information into those processes as a result of this project, and I guess also just aggregate the data in a better way that hopefully you can use it for other downstream processes like cash flow forecasting and things like that in the future too?
It definitely is a system that we see as being very central in nature to kind of our whole financial communication structure. So, TIS connects with your ERPs, your accounting systems, and then also with the banks. But when we learned that TIS also connects with various other fintech software, such as your TMS, like you mentioned, we're using Kyriba at this point in time. We saw it as acting more like a centralized data lake where we could keep all of our data regarding transactions, balances, and whatnot in a centralized location that all of these other pieces of software could, pull from, so that you don't just have this nasty web of connections between different systems.
Yeah, and so from that standpoint, I guess if we were to think about the big picture technology plan at Buller, it seems like one thing I've noticed about you guys is you've really dismissed this kind of one size fits all kind of mentality, or needing one solution to manage everything. You're really comfortable working with multiple different technology solutions, and having confidence that you're going to be able to get them to integrate well. A lot of that has to go with obviously the architecture of the applications themselves, SaaS applications interacting through APIs and things like that. But this is more of I guess, a mindset that a lot of organizations are starting to develop, but it seems like you guys have been there for a while. And I'm just curious, what led to that? I guess what allowed you guys to kind of take on that sort of a approach to technology implementations? Was it past experiences, or just good understandings about how technology works these days? Or
yeah, I think it's a little bit of both. So we've got a really great IT team, and we've got some great backing from the owners as far as funding for implementing and putting the software and technology solutions in place. So we've been doing this for a long time, and so there's a great understanding as far as what works and what doesn't, just from experience. And then, like I said, we've got some great guidance from our IT teams as far as what can be done and what's realistic, and what would accomplish our goals in the best way. But I think what we've come to learn over the years is that the one size fits all solution, like you were saying, the piece of technology that just solves all of your problems, doesn't really necessarily exist. And it's better to stick with companies that are good at a couple things, and utilize them for those services, and then find a way to incorporate other pieces of technology that are great at what they do in with your full infrastructure, so that you can really get the best outcome in the end.
Yeah, from that standpoint, I guess, did you guys have a like a fully built out multi-year, technology plan as it pertains to finance, treasury, AP? Like, do you guys know exactly where each technology slots in, where TIS fits into that picture? Or is it more of a kind of learn as you go type approach, where, I guess you're figuring out how certain things plug into each other, what specific, pain points or objectives you're trying to solve each way along the way? Or is it just about like maintaining flexibility? I can see, there being a standpoint of it as well, where something like what we do from a payments and banking activity standpoint can be viewed as kind of like foundational, right? It's almost needed for whatever's going to come after it. So I'm just kind of curious about how you guys have kind of laid out this roadmap, so to speak, for technology investment.
Yeah, I mean, of course, we have a formal plan, and we have everything laid out, and we know where we want to slot everything into each other, and how things are going to work, in our 5 or 10-year future. But it's kind of like traveling in a way. If you plan out every minute of what it is that you're doing, you're just going to create a lot of headaches for yourself, and things are never really going to work out quite as they seem. So I'd say that our plan is focused, but it's also flexible enough that it allows for things to change if we notice that this might slot in a little bit nicer with that, or we find out that TIS will work really well with another system, or if we don't necessarily need to incorporate a certain piece of technology because we can find our solution from someone else. So I'd say you need to have a good idea of where you're going, because it would be a costly mistake and a lot of wasted time and effort if you didn't. But you need to stay flexible, and you need to kind of learn as you go, because there's so much that you're going to learn just kind of going through the process that you really just don't know what you don't know until you go through it. So
Yeah, that's a good approach to have. I mean, and you guys certainly have a good team of people supporting you from an IT standpoint, from a regional finance standpoint. So, but it's nice to
yeah.
see you guys that kind of flexibility and open-mindedness to sort of some of these more cutting-edge technology strategies. Getting back to the coffee talk topic a little bit here in terms of the ecosystem standpoint for leveraging technology. I think that Bowler is a great example of an organization that is leveraging technology from an ecosystem standpoint. For TIS, you're basically, if I think about it, you're using it as like an enabling technology to drive efficiency in other applications regionally, right? So basically all you're trying to do is kind of, maintain this frictionless flow of data that can drive automation with existing applications regionally, the ERPs or other applications that might be in place today, and get that to be a lot more networked throughout the organization so you can use that data more strategically. But what you're not doing is basically trying to influence the technologies themselves that are being used in these subsidiaries, or even like the local processes, or how people are choosing to implement these technologies. And I think you can see that kind of broadly throughout the project in a few different places. The local finance and IT teams have been able to remain kind of autonomous for a lot of the decision making in terms of how their existing ERPs are going to integrate with TIS, or even what types of file formats they want to use, which has a lot of benefits in the sense that it allows them to really understand the process locally and the integrations, and be able to manage that on a go forward basis. And so, I guess was this part of the plan? You know what I mean? Or did you guys just kind of figure out as you went that, hey, this is a flexible solution and we can implement it flexibly, and still retain a good amount of autonomy within these regions?
Yeah, I think we approach this as, we're going to learn about this infrastructure and setup as we go. I mean, it would have been great to achieve a standardized result, but anytime you work on something global in nature, there's never necessarily a standardized approach that you can take. So we had in mind what types of file formats we wanted to utilize for payments, and then also for reporting and for communicating with our different ERPs. But each one's different, and each one offers a different formatting solution and specifications that are required, and each one provides a different set of data. So it really wasn't standardized at all. And so you have to remain flexible and realize that you can't just force a square peg in a round hole. I mean, otherwise you're going to end up doing a lot of development work, and you're going to significantly delay your project, and maybe the result isn't going to be quite as amazing as if you had just listened to your teams and kind of remain flexible enough that you could work your projects around what their needs were. So that's what we try and keep in mind as we're working with each of the local teams and with each business, is that each of them are different in their own right, and they need things to happen a certain way in order to achieve the best results. So.
Yep, yeah, you guys have struck a great balance there, I think. And so, I guess despite not needing to get too much in the weeds, you probably have gained ways to be able to, I guess, enforce standard controls across your organization, or even, I guess, bring a level of accountability to some extent to certain processes, like, around how new accounts are opened, that sort of process, or, how manual payments are executed. So is that something you guys are looking to kind of take advantage of as part of this project too?
Yeah, definitely. So there's certain things that we're going to maintain control of up here at the holding company, as far as bank accounts cannot be opened without our knowledge, and adding users to the system or signers to accounts and whatnot. We need to have knowledge of that. But outside of those high level goals that we have with fraud mitigation and reduction of manual entry error and a few other items, we've given the flexibility to our local teams to kind of set things up as they wish. But then, also there's things that are in place within the system, like an inventory process that forces certain high-level individuals within each of the subsidiaries to review the account structure, the banking structure, and whatnot, and sign off on it to ensure that everything's correct on a regular basis. And it forces them to take a look at their structure and make sure that everything's as efficient as it can be. So it's a great system in that it allows us to have all the controls in place, all the delegation of authority that's already there within our organization, but then formalize it and maintain some flexibility so that they can run their businesses how they need to run them in order to meet their needs.
It seems like, this ecosystem approach to technology, one of the byproducts, or actually maybe a lot of organizations are intending to do this, is, the results in really all the data within the organization becoming a lot more unified. So suddenly you not only have all your banking information unified in one platform, one data source, you also have a lot of other information, like, all of your AP payment information, your suppliers, all of your bank account type information. And aggregating all this data into one centralized source is a good way to kind of prepare for downstream further efficiencies, I guess, that are coming to market these days. Things like AI-based cash flow forecasting tools that rely on an aggregation, a good data source to be able to predict out patterns and things like that. Likewise, fraud mitigation tools that rely on a holistic data set to be able to detect anything abnormal based on patterns. So have you guys given any thought to that? Is that kind of an objective of this project as well, to kind of unify data and think about downstream efficiencies you can gain through AI and pattern recognition?
It is. So we have kind of a three-phased approach to our implementation. Phase one is just getting all the connections set up and in place. Like you had mentioned, we have other fintech software in place that have connections with the banks. We have connections with our ERPs, but it's just really kind of a tangled web of connections that is really messy, and it does the job, but it doesn't necessarily make for an easy future expansion into AI tools and statistical analysis and whatnot. So we're trying to clean up the connections, have one centralized hub for the data. Like I said, using the system as kind of a data lake and a centralized location for connecting to all of our ERPs and banks. And then phase two would be bringing in the other fintech software. So our TMS system, bringing in our HR systems, bringing in some of the other financial technology that we're utilizing regionally, globally, and whatnot. And then phase three would be putting all that data and all those connections to use for better forecasting, for statistical analysis, behavioral analytics, and whatnot, in order to gain a better understanding of how the financials within our organization work, so that we can make more efficient use of our cash, not have that idle cash sitting around, improve our profitability and whatnot. So it's probably a 5-year plan, but it's going to ultimately result in a much better organization for ourselves.
Yeah, no, it sounds like it. I mean, you guys have already achieved a lot, and with a big scope, obviously a big global scope of subsidiaries and banks, and so exciting to see what comes on the horizon here as you guys implement some of these additional technologies and things down the road. One thing I know the listeners always love to hear is are there any lessons learned from your experiences with this project? Like anything that you wish that you knew up front that you figured out later on that probably would have made things a lot easier, that you could share?
Yeah. So I think some good tips and tricks would be, before you do an implementation of anything like this, whether it be this system or another, reach out to your teams and gain a full understanding of what it is that you're going to need to do ahead of time to get ready for an implementation like this, and get the ball rolling, get buy-in from everyone, get the technical specifications all together, get your checklists together, get your plan together, so that you can come to the table with all the documentation that's needed, a full understanding of all the technical specifications that you're going to need to know in order to make decisions, and a full understanding of how the organization works. That it'll save you a lot of time and effort when it comes time to put any kind of implementation like this in place. And then also, identify where your pain points might be. For us, it's been with establishing Swift connections, and anybody who's worked with Swift kind of knows that it's a difficult process, and it's step by step, and you only get information about the next step once you've completed the first step, so recognize where your pain points might be, and where you maybe might need to bring in a consultant or someone to aid you through the process in order to make it go a little bit more efficiently and help with that process itself. So I would say that that's a big thing. And then also really just have a full understanding of what your goal is that you're trying to achieve. And keep that in mind throughout the whole process, because as you meet with the different teams and groups and whatnot, they're going to want you to be flexible in how you approach your implementation. But then you have to keep in mind what it is ultimately on a global scale that you're trying to achieve, and not waver from that, so that at the end of the day, the system is coming out in a manner that is consistent with your original goal. So.
Some great pointers there from both the technical standpoint in terms of Swift connectivity. It definitely does seem like we've moved a lot quicker on some of the banks we've connected with directly through Hostos connections versus some of these banks that were only reachable through Swift. So that's a good consideration for organizations to have in mind for sure when you consider the pace of your project, and then the overall project approach. I mean, you definitely need to know where you're going to go and get buy-in from all the individuals that are impacted to be able to achieve what you're looking to achieve in a project of this magnitude. So thanks a lot for all those insights there. This does bring us to the end of the talk track that we had set up here for this coffee talk session. Well, thanks once again, everybody, for joining the session today. I hope you found it informative. Bobby, also thanks to you for joining the conversation, for sharing all the insights. That was, I think, really valuable. So I appreciate that. If anybody does want to continue the conversation after the coffee talk, always happy to connect on LinkedIn. I know Bobby probably as well to chat about any of the topics that we covered today. And yeah, otherwise, I hope everybody enjoys the rest of the day, and hopefully we see you on our next coffee talk.